when I was working at HUD downtown. A jet took off, and I went to the window. First, I saw a triangular-shaped object. Then when I went to the car, I went over the top of the building, and this is at 400 State Street. Now, outside, I saw at least 3 objects. Like one was over down by Southwest Boulevard and different places, and then they would zoom up to the top of me and stop, and then turn. And it happened at least 3 other times, almost, and it finally scared me. So why we're so lucky, I don't know, but for some reason, maybe we're just more perceptive. I don't know, but it seems like some people are more attracted to them or they're attracted to us. I don't know which.
My guest is Mike McCord. He's a MUFON investigator for Kansas, the state of Kansas. And we've talked before. I wanted to get back in touch because so much has happened since we've talked, actually, talking more about it's okay to talk about UAPs and UFOs now. I also want to talk about your personal experience because this isn't something where you're just a tire kicker. You have real life paranormal happenings and you've had it throughout your life. This is kind of a natural outcome from that as being a MUFON investigator. So give us a backstory on how you got started with MUFON and then also a little bit about some of the paranormal stuff that you experience.
First of all, thank you for having me on your show again, Wendy. I'm really into all the same topics that you are with your show and that you've experienced in your personal life. So we've got a lot of common. I don't know why we're so lucky we get picked out for these things, but for whatever reason, they seem to be attracted to both of us. And me, I know I've had a number of experiences, but yeah, I've always been interested in strange things like UFOs and Bigfoot and anything, unusual. I remember I read Frank Edwards' Strangest of All when I was a little kid, and I actually joined a thing called NICAP when it was National Investigations Committee on Area Phenomenon when I was about, 11 years old. And they were one of the original organizations that investigated UFOs. So I've always been interested in these topics. And I think I became a MUFON investigator in I believe it's around 2011. So it's been a while. And I've never counted them exactly, but I know I've investigated well over 100 cases. Everything from personal alien encounters to lights in the sky to people that can call UFOs and get responses, any number of things and just videos and a whole number of things. So there's a lot of different areas we could discuss. But I guess, if you wanted to talk about my personal experiences, I have had a lot of both paranormal and UFO experiences. The paranormal are so numerous, I could talk for an hour about that. I think what I'll maybe emphasize a little more is the ones that I have taken pictures of that involve UFOs and even orbs. So I guess where to start, the first one, as far as a UFO is concerned, as some people might know, I had a really bad injury in 2001 and was left paralyzed. And then I lost my job and my wife divorced me. It was quite a dark night of the soul, but I fortunately recovered from all that. And 30 months later, my sons and I climbed Mount Elbert, which is the highest mountain in Colorado. Well, about halfway up the mountain, one of my boys took a picture of me with the scenery in the background. And in the picture, there's an object about in the left-hand corner of the picture. There was an object about a mile away, and it was stationary. That was strange. Then moving ahead, I went to Peru and Bolivia one time to look at megalithic structures such as Pumapunku and some of the unexplained sites down there. Anyway, on the way back on the airliner, we were about 30 minutes out of Lima, and then there was some really pretty clouds, so I just snapped a couple of pictures. And in the picture, again, they were taken simultaneously, was an orb in the first picture, and then the plane was going about 500 miles an hour. And then the second one, it was a little further back. So it raised the question to me, are these things always around? I mean, are they really metal crafts or are they living organisms or whatever? It's raised a question in my mind. But just randomly taking these pictures, I had a picture. I had a UFO. Another one just outside of Olathe. I took a picture and there was an object in the cloud. But the last one I'll mention was more of an orb. And this was, and I have a picture of it as well. I'm from Nebraska, and I was riding around in my dad's old pickup one night. And to all the old places that we knew. And I took a picture. There was a kind of a spooky old road, and it was about dusk. So I took a picture. I took two pictures. And in the first picture, it was just this, the road. But in the second picture, which was like a second later, there was a gigantic white ball that was right up against me. And it was just out of nowhere, which raised the question to me. I certainly don't think it was an alien, but I think this shows that there are living entities that exist around us. And I've had several cases that fall into line along those as well. One, just quickly, out in Peabody, Kansas, several people saw orbs flitting around a streetlight. And when they went outside, one came down to them. First, they said one flew off into a field because it was shy, which I thought was an interesting comment. And the other one came down to eye level and went into the ground. And interestingly, I also saw these sort of orbs around a streetlight near my home in Olathe. So whether they're electrical, leakage off the line, or whether they're fairies, I don't know, but I do believe there's an unexplained world around us. So that's kind of a background of some of the pictures and some of the experiences I've had. There are many more. I think I've had a total of 9 UFO encounters in my life, and including some that are just really hard to explain. And I don't know, did you have any questions about that before we move on?
What I do want to question you about before we go on, when you mentioned Peru, there's one super paranormal experience. It stands out because it's so unusual. You had your ID card. That one is mind-blowing, okay?
Yeah, that was weird. And I think you even did a reading on that. So my last day, and we were in Bogota, and we were leaving the next morning. And so that morning I got up, and I couldn't find my passport. And I looked everywhere for it, and it wasn't anywhere to be found. So it was a long story. I had to get a separate flight. I spent the night in the airport and everything. But the interesting thing is when I was waiting to get my, ticket to fly back to America, I happened to run into a guy who was with the emissary in Bogota. And he told me that wasn't the first time that an ID had been taken. So when we got home, and I know you did a reading and said that somebody had taken it and then brought it back because it wasn't who I was. I didn't fit the profile. Interestingly, when I got home, I found it in a bag that I knew I had never put it. So it was there, and that was a really unusual experience. I have had other things when things disappeared. Almost one time at my office in Kansas City, Kansas, I was working late, and as I was leaving, my ID card slipped underneath a file cabinet. So I was left alone in the office. So I took everything out of the file cabinet, lifted the file up, and nothing was there. It was totally inexplicable. I would have spent the night in the office if it hadn't been for the maintenance crew that was cleaning up. So these are just a couple of the unusual experiences I've had that just beyond the pale. So I don't know what to say, but there's been a lot of them.
And then the other one would be the cane that you found in your car out of the blue.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That was another one, yes. Yeah, this goes back to when I lived in Grand Island at the time, in Grand Island, Nebraska. And I have and still have a 1965 Mustang that is my, my legacy. I love it with all my heart. So I used to drive it to work. So one morning I was going to work, and there was an old, wooden cane, like that had obviously been used, laying on the front seat of my car. And I just thought, well, gosh, some old guy must have been checking out the car and forgot his cane. So I left it in the car for several days, and but nobody ever came. So I finally, took the cane in the house, and we kept it. We kind of made a little thing out of it. If you remember the miracle on 38th Street where Santa Claus left his cane, so I'd set the cane out on Christmas Eve because it's sort of our strange paranormal cane. But the funny thing is, then many years later, I did have this accident where I fell down some stairs and broke my neck and was left paralyzed with a small chance of walking again. And so to this day, I'm using that cane. And it's just so strange. It's beyond words. I don't know whether it was something from the future that came back or whether it was me coming back. But that cane that appeared in the car in 1980 is now a cane that I use. So something was giving me a warning or telling me ahead of time that this was going to be needed for me in my later life.
See, that's amazing. The other part, though, is just the fact that you were paralyzed. The prognosis was that you weren't going to be able to be fully functional again. And what was your mantra that said that that wasn't the diagnosis you were going to accept?
Yeah, this happened when I was in intensive care at the time at the Overland Park Regional Center, and I was alone in my room, and so I remember asking God, and I was never terribly religious, but I am spiritual. So I asked God, how am I going to get out of this? And just immediately, these words came to me, and it was not out loud, but it was in my head. And it said, do what's doable whenever you can. Work on your areas of strength first, and never give up or believe. So I wrote those down, I had my wife write them down, and that became my mantra. And it still is. And I've had a number of other instances happen since, including now having knee replacements. Those words have come back to me over and over. I even passed them on to a young man when I got out of the hospital that was paralyzed, and he since was walking as well. So those words, they came from God. I'm sure of that, and it's a lesson to all of us that you're really not a victim in life. I wrote a book about this called One Step at a Time, Memoir of a Former Quadriplegic, that is available. It talks about all these experiences because there were paranormal experiences during my recovery too that I really believe I was given, divine help. And it shows that, again, you all have these same capabilities, just as did Jesus, to overcome major obstacles in your own lives.
I like the fact that it never stopped you, and that, that's a testament to how powerful the mind is in terms of saying, okay, I'm going forward. You are a MUFON investigator. So what all does that entail?
A MUFON investigator is really the purpose of MUFON. It's first of all, it's the largest citizen organization in the country, if not the world. And the purpose of MUFON is to really explain these events. We do an investigation that would be worthy of any investigator, where we look into all the different possibilities of what could explain these things. And we get literally thousands of reports, and hundreds, if not 1,000 a month nationwide. I've personally investigated, like I said, over 100. And so when I get a case, first of all, we get all the background information and let the person tell their story. Then we ask non-leading questions to try to see if their story matches up with the what they reported. Then I check other websites to see if there are similar cases around the same time period. Look into every possibility, whether it could be a drone or a conventional aircraft. We have programs that can determine whether or not there was a conventional aircraft in the sky at the time, or a meteor or a shooting star or a satellite, anything like that. We look into every possibility to try to explain them. And in most cases, I've never seen the exact number, but probably in the majority of cases, they're just misidentified things that they saw. But there's a lot of them that are not. Personally, I think there's more than one explanation when it comes to this. Some things I've had, and I've even seen them myself, where they're either military or clearly, extraterrestrial. I could tell you several cases that I've had, but so they're either a natural object, a conventional aircraft, maybe even a secret aircraft. They could be possibly, in some cases, just the planet Venus. But in others, I've had cases where people have had one-on-one close encounters with aliens that they've explained to me, or I don't have a picture of one, unfortunately, but so they're either aliens or I think in some cases they're organic beings that live both in the air, in the higher atmosphere, as well as on the ground, such as the orb I had on the country road near my hometown of Nelson. And pictures that other people sent me, the one in Peabody, Kansas, that these people saw these little objects. And also a very strange case I had down in Columbus, Kansas, where a man was having all kinds of strange events happen in his house. In fact, they called it the Spooksville Triangle. I could go into some detail on that too, but he saw a number of things that could only be explained as living objects. I had pictures I took myself of these objects that were, and he had experiences in February, so they weren't insects, but he had a whole number of things. That in itself I could talk about for a long time. But so I think there's a number of explanations for all these things. But that's the purpose of MUFON, and if we get so many cases every month, it's just unbelievable how many people are seeing things. And I think a lot of times it's just a matter of looking up in the sky. And then there's another topic, and I haven't gotten into, and that's those people that can call UFOs and get responses. So that's just kind of a brief summary of what we do. It's a very fun hobby of mine.
Yeah. I want to real quickly touch on that organic beings, because a friend called me and she said that the UFOs are back. And I asked her where and what she was talking about. She was on an upper level of a building. I have the picture somewhere in my archives. I can't find it. I wish I had bookmarked it somehow, but even then it could have been in an old file. And it is tentacles. In the window, you can see these pink tentacles, and they're hanging down, and you can almost see through them, but they're obviously there. And so when she said UFO, that was not the first thing that came to mind, was tentacles hanging outside the window.
Wow.
But she said, yeah, they come on. She saw them off and on, and that we had that conversation, and then I lost track of her, and I'm like, darn. Yeah, so there you go. But then one of them that didn't make the case files for MUFON, but definitely should be there.
Well, I understand, and I know you've had several cases yourself that I believe I've investigated, at least one or maybe two. But yeah, you have a lot of experiences in that whole in this entire genre. I know that.
Well, that's why I'm so fascinated by it, because I think the more we share, we each have our own perspective. You're able to see them, and that's what also you mentioned. Going out and having people call them in right in the middle of the United States, Kansas, outdoors. We're seeing these where people are showing them. Oh, they're off over the water, or Florida, somewhere coastal. I don't think people understand. It happens everywhere. And I know a couple of people who have had a lot of experiences in Nebraska. I even have a relative who had one in Kansas, but it's been about 40 years. So 40 years puts it back a while. And at the same time, there was somebody else there who asked if he had opportunity to see something, and he knew better, and he said no. He said no. So that way he got to keep the camera and the film. So there's that was a problem for a long time, where if someone took a picture and somebody in authority, a certain authority, knew about it, they didn't get to keep it. And that's part of our history, real history. So it's nice, that some of these things have survived.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's very true. And there again, that's a whole other topic with government secrecy and them coming in, taking, evidence that people have, and then they disappear and they never hear it again. There's many, many cases of that happening. Now, why, I'm not sure. I think they're slowly beginning to reveal these, at least acknowledge that there are things they can't explain, everything from the Tic Tac video to several others and even they've even testified before Congress. Several people in the past, Stephen Greer, I know, has a number of stories in that regard, that the military is finally acknowledging. I think they're doing it drip by drip. I keep hearing rumors that there's going to be a big reveal in either 2026 or 2027. We'll see, but there's a lot from that standpoint, including aliens that have been, held in captivity and have worked with the military. That's a whole topic of discussion that the general public hasn't been told a lot about, but I think in time they will be.
Well, even in your files, you do have people who have reported seeing beings, and not just a ship or an orb, but a real live entity of some sort.
Yeah, they have. And I can tell you one real quickly. This was one of the most interesting cases I had. This was a lady. It's been a few years ago now, but she worked here in Olathe, where I live. and she worked here in Olathe, and she lived in Spring Hill, Kansas. So she said one night she was driving home, she saw a light was following her. It's like and she was on the late night shift, so it was real late after midnight, and she saw this object following her. So when she got home, she went upstairs and went to bed. And about an hour later, she said she had to get up and get a drink of water. So she went into the kitchen to get a drink of water. She looked out the window, and she said in the backyard there was a clothesline with her mom's quilt, hanging on it. And she said as she was drinking her water, an alien stepped out from behind the tarp, or from the blanket that was there. And she said it was a classic gray. It was just a bulbous head with large black eyes and real skinny arms and legs. And they made contact, and she said telepathically it was friendly and it wanted to come in the house. And she said, "No, I don't want you to do that." She had this amazing experience. But the funny thing is, and this isn't unusual, the next day she forgot about it. And this for maybe 10 years or so, it didn't come to mind until she was talking to her brother a few months before the report. And he were talking about the military, and it jogged her memory that this had happened, and it all came back to her. And then it opened up a whole other genre of things that had happened to her in the past, including when she was a little girl being interviewed by strange men in black. One of the strangest things that I remember, she said she was walking down the street one day, and she met a man dressed in real funny old-fashioned clothes, and he dropped a coin. So when he was gone, she picked it up, and she told me this was, I think it was a dime, was dated 5 years in the future. And then she had many more experiences where she was seeing him every night. Some of this stuff is just almost too much to believe. But again, as an investigator, how do I know? I mean, she was as rational as you and I, and she was just as serious as could be. But unless I did a total psychological examination on them, I can't say for sure. So unfortunately, so many of these cases are anecdotal, but there's abductions. There's thousands of reports where people have had close encounters. And I even have had another one that's maybe too far out of the realm to even go into, but a lady that claimed to have a personal relationship with an alien. And there's more than one case in that too. So they range from everything from a star in the sky to one-on-one encounters to being able to call UFOs and get a response. And that seems to be increasing as well.
I want to do that one next, but first the one in Delphos, Kansas, because Delphos is well known. This event, they talk about how it left an imprint, a pattern imprint, and the woman who touched it then touched her leg and had numbness as a result. And so it sounds like radiation. But that was the famous Delphos, Kansas. You have one where there's a direct contact with aliens.
Yeah, I did. And this was a man that he lived in Delphos. It was about a year or two ago. And this gets almost to the point of I got to question some things. First of all, he said when he was in Vietnam, his troops met some guys. No, I'm sorry. They were on a patrol, and they met some aliens came to them, and they said they had been tracking the military, and he had a conversation with them. He even gave me what they call their badge number to prove he was in Vietnam. And he said his whole patrol witnessed these things. And then later, when he lived in Delphos, he claimed that these aliens started showing up on his property, and they were in a craft, and he became friendly with them. And he said one even stayed with him for a while because he was sick, and told me how they watched TV together and everything. He told me that he was given a ride, and first of all, he told me that these aliens came from the smallest planet in Orion's belt. And they were here, and they were on a mission to observe Earth and help mankind. He told me he was given a ride in the UFO. Unfortunately, I was never able to personally interview him because he kind of became a little hard to get a hold of, and we kind of decided that maybe he was making it all up. But so I'll never know. But he claimed to have the one-on-one relationships with these people with aliens that had shown him all these places they'd been and taken him for rides in their aircraft. again, it's hard to, it's like sometimes it separates the wheat from the chaff, but you get a lot of strange stories.
Well, and then Preston Dennett has several stories. Same thing, the people who piloted craft. I also, and when I talked with John Foster, he didn't pilot a craft, but he has diagrams and drawings on his website of the inside and what it looked like of various craft, not just one, but several. And then Artie Six Killer Clark, when I interviewed her, she said one of the guys she spoke with who had an encounter while he was in the Middle East, the alien said, you can go through here and leave. You don't have to be in this war zone. You can go ahead and leave. Just walk through this tunnel and you'll be home. And he said, that would be nice, but that would not help with my military career.
Yeah, right.
So he opted not to, but that was his encounter with someone, and that and she has lots of very fascinating stories from the indigenous perspective. And so some of these, I mean, they may sound outlandish, but you're right. How do we know? You just document it and let it speak for itself. And if other people corroborate it with similar stories and completely unknown to each other with details. I remember talking with Paula Harris, I think is her, I'm trying to remember what it was about, but it was, I think they were doing an event somewhere like with a UFO convention or something. And I told her my experience included having a sense of when they were present. I never saw them, but when I knew there was this ET alien unexplained presence, the air changed and it would be more like a high altitude, thin and crisp and clear, the air. And somebody, I think they refer to it as ozone. I just know it changed my senses. I could hear better. I smelled things that I didn't normally. It was like everything was heightened, and I knew they were there. And there were other things that happened too. But it's like the whole atmosphere around something like that shifts. So you kind of have to figure out which way is up. It isn't easy to describe, especially if I were trying to. And I did talk to you. I think that's how we met. Actually, was one of the sightings I had. It's really difficult because there are things that we don't even have any context for that happen when you're in that space of something that isn't normally around us 24/7.
That's true. You know, I'll tell you a story that I have never told anyone, not even my family about, but I know this one personally from a person who he's since passed away, but he was a UFO investigator. And this combines both a UFO as well as something so inexplicable, I'm not even sure how you describe it, except that, again, that there are unknown things around us. This man, and I knew him very well, he served in Iraq. He was a platoon sergeant. They were in, I think it was Germany, now that I think about it, because the president at the time, I think it must have been Obama, was coming to see them, and he was with his platoon, and they saw a triangle in the sky above them, just motionless. And he didn't want to report it because he thought, again, he didn't want to jeopardize his career, but there's a good chance that might have been a military craft. But he said he saw it, and all of his squad saw this. But then it takes another completely different turn. He was, Mark was his name, and he said he was out in the forest, in the black forest, and he was meditating. And he said he got done, and he started to walk back to town, and all of a sudden he heard something on a hill up above him, and he turned and looked, and he saw what was a misty something, and he didn't know what it was, but it started rolling down the hill like a ball of mist or electricity or something. It rolled down, and it was about 100 yards behind him, and when it stopped, it took the form of a creature so bizarre. As I recall, he said it looked kind of like a goat with its feet backwards, and it had horns, and it had, jaw, sawtooth mouth, and it was looking at him very aggressively, and he was terrified. And he said he thought he didn't want to turn his back to it because if he did, he knew it would kill him. So he walked backwards, and it never did follow him. And he got away. But that's a story so beyond the pale, again, that, I wouldn't even know how to categorize that, but combines both the whole UFO experience as well as these unknown cryptoids that live around us. And that's another whole topic. But anyway, that's what he told me face to face.
And that's what people get into with the Dogman, the Bigfoot, the whole nine yards. Little people, the hidden folk. These aren't. These have been around for decades, if not hundreds of years. It's just we're finally now able to connect a few dots because, for one thing, we've got some kind of way, a translation, which we didn't used to have, that kept us all separate. Finding out these entities are global, and that's huge.
I think they just go by different names depending on the culture.
I agree, because you have little people, you have hidden folk, there's another word for it, whether, you got fairies and brownies and all different names and different pictures. It's just fascinating the way that we have figured out to either make it a fiction, a fantasy, an imagination, and yet they happen to people and they have real-time consequences. Either making you late for work, keeping you up all night, destroying things sometimes, or giving you presents, or making things happen to save your life. And that's also possible.
That's right. Yeah, I have stories on that too. I won't go into them, but I've even had a fairy encounter myself. But I agree completely. They can be good or bad or just mischievous.
Okay, we've teased about the guys who call in UFOs. So you visited and were actually somebody demonstrated that ability.
Yeah, I actually had two cases. The first one was about a year ago. I guess it was a man out in Norton, Kansas. And he put a report into MUFON, and the way it started out, he sent some videos. He said he was driving back home from Wichita on, I guess it'd be I-135 back to Norton, and these things started following his car. And I know you've had a case of a small UFO, and he did too. They were in a craft, in kind of a triangular shaped craft, and they were following right beside him, and he could see inside these vehicles of little creatures, and he took a video of them and he sent them to me, and he was quite freaked out about it. So I investigated that. I was never able to get a clear image of them, but that's how it started. But then when he got home, he said he started being able to see UFOs above his house, and he could call them. So I said, well, that's cool. So I thought, well, I'm just going to take him up on this. I'm going to go see for myself. I needed an adventure anyway.
Yeah.
So I went to Norton. And met with him, and I did a check for high radioactivity around his car and a bunch of things. I didn't find anything. So anyway, he and myself, his two sons, and a neighbor lady went in the backyard. He said, he's going to call UFOs. So I said, okay, well, let's call them. So we started calling the UFOs. Mike from MUFON's here, and, show yourself. This went on for about 10 minutes, and I didn't see anything. Pretty soon, his neighbor lady said, oh, gosh, I just saw one. And then his son said, oh, I saw it too. But I didn't see it. So I began to kind of wonder, well, maybe this isn't, what it seems to be, what he's claiming. But then they said, now look at this area in the sky. And so I looked at this exact area, and I saw appear out of nothing an object. And it moved, I don't know, maybe it blinked, and it moved about three degrees to the south. Now, I should add that I have programs. I have one called Solarium that tests to make sure there's no meteorites or meteors or comets or satellites or anything like that. And I have another one called Flight Tracker where you can determine if there's any conventional aircraft, and there weren't. So I saw that, and I saw another one too on the other side on about 11 o'clock. So I saw two objects myself that I know that were not natural or man-made. He's since had other experiences. We've kind of become friends a little bit, and he's had these things that bothered him for a long time. So he's dealing with it. So that was the first case. The second case happened just very recently, like in January, and a man down in Wichita wrote us that he could call UFOs using a laser beam. And he was quite detailed on what he was seeing, and he had an infrared camera and everything. So again, I said, I'll go down myself. So I did. Met with him and his partner, and we went outside of his house to look at the UFOs. And so he used his laser beam, and he had a real strong pair of binoculars. Mine weren't as strong, so he was, saying, I see this and I see that. but I didn't see anything with my binoculars. But I kept looking, and again, I have rechecked. There wasn't anything natural or man-made. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, a light appeared in the sky. I'd say it was easily as bright as Venus, and it moved. It was about 2 o'clock in the sky, and it moved to maybe 5 o'clock. And then it stopped and moved. It turned to its right, would have been towards me, went a short distance and disappeared. And again, I saw another one too a little bit earlier. So there again, in 2 cases, I saw objects that I personally cannot explain. And we've since been in contact, and I've asked him to, videotape these and send some to me. So he's still seeing things. But again, I have to wonder, are these things available all the time? I mean, again, I took a picture of one out of the aircraft coming out of Lima, and he took these pictures and they're tracking it. Are they aliens, or are they possibly organic beings? And other people have done the same thing. I know there's a man named Chris Bledsoe. He was on a show called Expedition X, where he's been investigated by NASA and very high-level officials that he can call UFOs as well. He wrote a book called UFOs of God, and he again thinks they're angelic-type beings. So it's an open question as to what these things really are, but I just know I've seen them with my own eyes, and so have other people. And also I might add that our state director told me that these kinds of cases are increasing. More and more people in Kansas, and Kansas is kind of a hot spot, especially around Great Bend, have had a lot of activity. And whether these things are, revealing themselves in degree along with the government, I don't know, but seems to be an increase in these kind of reports.
That I think is true. And I don't know if just now people have decided, well, okay, I've heard somebody else did it, and so I can do it too. It's definitely, I think, increasing.
And I would just encourage anybody to go out. I mean, we even had a guy give a presentation at one of the MUFON chapter meetings where he said that anybody can call UFOs. His technique was basically very simple. He said, go into a meditative state and get your mind, in a very calm place, and then concentrate on them and call them in your mind to come, and then go outside. And he said, wear some sunglasses so you can see things more clearly. I mean, objects as compared to the night sky. And he said, you will see UFOs. And I've not tried this myself. You might try it on you. Your listeners may try it. But he said that they are visible. They do seem to respond to you telepathically. So take it for what it's worth, but maybe give it a try.
The other thing I know that they're talking about recently is that some people who say they've had encounters have claimed that they've been marked, like with the fluorescent light. It hasn't been mainstream, but I know one researcher's been studying that since the early 90s. And then a person I talked to recently who said he went into a portal said that he remembered them saying, mark him. And he sent me his picture with a mark on his hand. It dissolves in about 48 hours, but it was there.
Yeah, that's true. I've had a couple of abduction cases. I know one lady, I think I sent you some pictures of a jellyfish-like type object in the sky, but she woke up one morning. They were in a motel, and I think it was in New Jersey, and there was a mark, some area on her thigh that skin had been removed. And she, she felt there was missing time involved with that as well. And she felt she had been abducted. And sometimes this will follow people generationally. But this lady, I can't give you her name, of course, but had a number of experiences and continues to have them. She lives in Western Kansas too. So, yeah, they're, for what purpose, I don't know. But there's even talk of hybrids being, people having their eggs or sperm taken and then being shown, offspring later that are there. There's quite an agenda here that we're not fully aware of.
You included in your report, you gave me a compilation of reports, and you included one that you didn't investigate, but actually is one of the most famous cases, an abduction case. I'm trying to see which it is. It's Hynek was involved. Missouri man saw some unusual lights over the Missouri River. Missing time.
Yeah, I don't think I put that in my final report, but yeah, there was that one, and then there was the case in Marley Woods as well. that had a whole bunch of different phenomena. But yeah, you're right. There was the case that was, I don't have it right in front of me, but yeah, where there was a clear abduction, and I'd have to go back and find a source for that. And it was investigated by Alan Hynek as well as Ted Phillips. He lived in Springfield, but he was a very famous investigator.
It's easy to dismiss them, but then when you start reading all of the reports and the numbers of things that correlate and the similarities, it's really hard to say this isn't happening.
It really is. I'll tell you another real quick case here. I know I'm probably getting close on time here, but that I thought was interesting. And this happened over in Kansas City, Kansas, where a man, he was a security guard in the Fairfax, I shouldn't probably say, in one of the auto plants here in Kansas City, Kansas. And one morning, he and his friends saw a cylindrical object. He said it was just clear as day. They had portals, windows in it. But the interesting thing about his case was he said it disappeared like it was going through a portal. You mentioned portals. It was like this object went into something and it just disappeared one window at a time and was gone. Two people saw this, but again, there are portals in other dimensions, wormholes, whatever you want to call them, that these things are using.
I saw a diagram, I think this is put out by MUFON actually, of the many different ways that they disappear. And some people were saying that's just the same type of thing that our military experience when they exceed the high speed. The people are describing these things in ways the military can't do, like going straight up at how many over 1,000 miles an hour, or disappearing, poof, just completely gone. Just take the report, let it sit for a while and see what else corroborates it. I think that's what we're having to do, is just let history tell us what's going on. Because when you see something like this for the first time, it changes your reality. When it happened to me, I'm like, wow, this is possible. Cool. Do you tell somebody else? It depends, because sometimes just one person saying you're full of it is enough to make you say, okay, I won't share it. I won't share it with anybody. Instead, find people who are also experiencing it and compare notes. For me, that's the best way. It's because then I learn more. I learn what to look for. I learn what else might be possible. And when I told, like I said, I talked with Paula Harris earlier, and I told her my experience. She said, did you write that down? Did you share it with anybody? Well, no, I didn't think about it at that point. I just knew it was interesting and it was odd, but it was a detail that she recognized that I had no context for because I wasn't comparing notes at that time. I didn't know. And then to know that, the atmospheric shift is big. The helicopter sound afterward was huge. I didn't know there was a helicopter sound associated with it, but it's also a change in what some people say, a change in dimension. It was a very extensive and multifaceted experience. It wasn't just one thing. It was multiple things happening at the same time. And that changed the way I view reality from that day forward. I'd already had experiences from 1997 and in childhood, but 1997 kicked off some big shifts. But this was mind-boggling. This is not just a paranormal thing. This is beyond what we consider paranormal. This is interdimensional, transdimensional, whatever. It does not fit our reality. And so then I started looking for other people who had great stories and great experiences and said, let's see what else is out there.
Well, I agree. And and I know you have, and I've had, not me personally, but I actually have. I've had interdimensional sounds of things that shouldn't be there. And I had a couple of cases, one in particular here not too long ago, where a person was reported a craft in the sky that then disappeared. Just like you say, where there was nothing there, and then suddenly there was, and then it was gone. And so, it's like whether I really believe they're aware of us somehow. They somehow can pick up on people's thoughts. And I think the more cognizant you become aware of this and open to things, the more they happen. I've had, of course, after my injury, went through a real transitional portion in my life where I had a number of, I guess you would call them, paranormal experiences too. So I think it's a matter of just opening your mind to these things, because there's a lot of stuff around us that we're just not aware of.
I also want to say this entity, experience, engagement, interface, it mimics some people. And so if you go into it with an angry, obstinate frame of mind, you often encounter that same type of energy back. If you go into it curious, open-minded, accepting, receptive, without intending to do harm, you're more likely at that point to visit with something that is more subtle, more gentle. But like with John Foster's story, he felt like he was protected when he was a child. When he was younger, even a teenager, some bullies had ganged up on him, and then he saw the interaction from the ET perspective of them antagonizing and attacking the bullies. And that's what he remembers, not just in one case, but that to me shows that reflection. And I know people who've had experiences say, well, these were really negative. And then I hear their attitude and it's like, well, you're pushing that right back at them. You're antagonistic and in some ways stubborn and you can't control me and blah, blah. That brings on that kind of energy, because I think some of this is for us to learn from, is to learn what energy you're putting out. This is what you're going to get back from some of these entities. I can't say it's 100%. I don't know that. I do know with my own experiences, they've all been positive, except when I deal with ghosts, and they can be cantankerous. That's just the way they are.
My thing, and I've had a number of, we've talked about it offline, but a number of paranormal experiences. I haven't even told you all of them, but in my opinion, we are in control. So whether it's paranormal or even to a certain extent the UFOs, don't let them scare you, because you are in control. You're stronger than they are, and if you don't want them around, you just tell them to bug off, and they will. I've had things happen, and I've even set house rules. I said, as long as you're nice, you can hang around, but don't push it. Yeah, and they will, and because you are stronger than they are, and never forget that.
Well, you have to determine that you have your own self-autonomy. You don't have to be pushed around. But a lot of that has to do with your own mental state, your own sense of authority. Sometimes it takes a while to develop that and to understand, or to ask for a higher power protection, whether it's Source, whether it's Jesus, whoever is your personal power, spirit, authority. Ask for help. Don't be afraid. A spirit guide. That's also part of it, is understanding you are not alone. There are many dimensions, and you have help. You have support if you ask for it. I like the Harry Potter thing. There's support for those who ask. Well, that's actually true. Okay, it is true.
Yes, it is.
So that divine energy is available to anyone and everyone who asks for it. I love the thing too about saints. Saints don't discriminate. If you need help from a saint, call out, because that's what they do. That's what they were given to do as their help. And it's like, I'm not Catholic, but I do know that I get help occasionally from saints, and I appreciate it. And I also am respectful, because it's we don't know about all this. We don't have proof. You just have to understand that it is possible, and if it's possible, then you have the ability to connect.
Wendy, I totally agree, and I also believe we have all the powers of Jesus. I think he was a man who realized these powers, and he tried to tell us that everything I can do, you can do it better. And there's a number of stories about that as well. So you also are a very powerful being. You just got to realize your own potential.
Well, we could talk another 3 or 4 hours with all of your case studies. So we'll just make a day to do this again, because there are cases every day. There's something new and something revealed that I think is fascinating with this, in terms of our consciousness, how we are beginning to accept that telepathy, for one thing, is real. That when you do have an out-of-body state, that's real. That's not imagination. It isn't fiction. You can do that. You can do astral traveling. You can have a precognitive dream. You can share a death experience with someone else. These things used to be taken as wives' tales or fiction, fantasy, imagination. And now we're getting people who are saying, so many people who are saying, this is what I experience. And that's how we learn, in my opinion.
I totally agree.
Your book, did you redo that book and put it out again?
Yes, I did. It's been sort of updated a little bit. It's called One Step at a Time, Memoir of a Former Quadriplegic. And it's available on Amazon as well as my website. And it tells the story of my basically when I was paralyzed and given a small chance of walking again, and did so, overcame that, and several other things, the divorce and loss of my job. But I ended up persevering and climbing the highest mountain in Colorado. And it's a story that basically tells everyone to, don't settle. Don't think you're a victim in life, because you really are in control. And I hope it gives a motivation and hope to a lot of people.
Oh, I think so. Because for one thing, if you don't believe in miracles and you read what happened to you in your book, then that's a miracle. It's outstanding. It is unbelievable. And it's shifted in so many ways your ability to basically claim your truth and say, hey, I did this. And not only did I do it, I climbed the mountain too. And then got a UFO picture.
Yeah, that's right. There's even a UFO picture involved. So I think they're all around us, and it's just a matter of whether you want to accept them or not. And I think they're generally here to help us. So I take help wherever I can get it.
Me too. Oh, what's your website real quick?
Well, it's called miraclesonestepatatime.com.
There are very few people who are able to get beyond the diagnosis.
It was quite a story in its own right. And like I say, it's being remarketed right now by Amazon. Mm-hmm. And I hope they will get some more. And again, I'll never recoup the money I've spent on the website and all this stuff. But it isn't about the money. It's more about just getting the word out to people that they're not a victim in life.
Yes, I agree. You got to the mountain. There's nobody else who would be able to climb a mountain and then say, oh, look, the UFO in the background.
That is. Yeah. Well, either that or they're going to find a butterfly net to throw over me.
Yeah. Fortunately, you were with your family, so you were safe. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
And I look forward to talking to you again.
Cheryl Costa, who did a book on sightings and stuff throughout the United States, she said people who see them, they're either outside smoking, walking their dog, mm-hmm. or looking up for whatever reason. And that's how you see a UFO. Mm-hmm. Walk your dog, take a smoke break, look up at the sky.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've had a number of, I forget how many I've had, different sightings throughout my life, at least half a dozen. That even when I was jogging one time, and one time when we lived in Nebraska, we were coming home and we saw this huge triangular-shaped object that passed right behind us. And I don't know how many sightings I've had, but whether I'm just more observant. I mean, in the time I was, I think I told you at one of the earlier shows, when I was working at HUD downtown, first a jet took off and I went to the window. First I saw a triangular-shaped object. Then when I went to the car, it went over the top of the building. And this is at 400 State Street. Now outside I saw at least three objects. Like one was over down by Southwest Boulevard and different places, and then they would zoom up to the top of me and stop, and then turn. And it happened at least three other times, almost, and it finally scared me. So why we're so lucky, I don't know, but for some reason, maybe we're just more perceptive. I don't know, but it seems like some people are more attracted to them or they're attracted to us. I don't know which.
And thanks for listening.